Thank you very much, President. I want to ask Georgia and Russia, was it worth it? 200,000 people ran from the places in which they were born. People were killed, people wounded, and people taken hostage. Houses burned, houses looted, people traumatized for the rest of their lives. Elderly who built up their homes, their region and their country. Elderly who are proud of where they come from, who now are separated from their grandchildren, not knowing if they will ever see them again. I want to be honest with you. The first time I went to the border zone in South Ossetia in September last year, I met people, I listened carefully, and I observed. But at the same time, because of the pressure of the program, I came and went. I did my job and I left. After I came home, I needed 3 weeks to deal with what I saw, what I heard, and what that information meant. Because of the war between Georgia and Russia in August last year, the Assembly decided that it wanted to know more about the humanitarian consequences of the war. As a result, I was asked to visit the region as a rapporteur. I went to Abkhazia, Sukhumi in the Gali region, and I visited Tbilisi and Gori and the surrounding region, the so-called buffer zone with South Ossetia. I very much regret that one day before my visit, the Russian and the de facto South Ossetian authorities informed me that I would not be allowed to enter South Ossetia from the south. This meant that I could not visit South Ossetia without an insight of the circumstances of the people of South Ossetia, and without that the picture isn't complete. I'm still determined to visit South Ossetia and would be prepared to go there in the mid of March if I receive a mandate from the Assembly to do this. But debating the humanitarian consequences of the war can be delayed any further. It is now 5 months since the start of the war. In the meantime, other news has overtaken the issue in the media. However, one thing is sure. In the northern part of Georgia, life has not returned to normal. It is therefore of essential importance that we, as the Assembly of the Council of Europe, highlight again and again the developments in the region which concerned the affected citizens. Since August, 100,000 internally displaced persons have returned to their homes, mostly in the so-called buffer zone. There are, however, approximately 37,500 displaced people remaining over the winter. Among them, 23,000 people have little or no respect of returning soon or ever. Of those who fled to Russia, all went back to South Ossetia with the exception of about 2,000. On top of the internally displaced persons I mentioned earlier, there are still 220,000 IDPs from earlier conflicts. They are also in urgent need of a permanent solution. The first and foremost important principle I want to emphasize is that all authorities involved have to be aware of and cooperate with each other on the fact that all IDPs, old and new, no matter how much time might have passed, must always retain the right to be able to return to the place where they lived before the conflict arose. Why visited Abkhazia? It wasn't directly touched by the war, although the Kodori Valley was occupied and 1,500 people fled. Their return at this point is uncertain. The Georgians living in the Gali region are suffering from the closure of the de facto border with Georgia. They are cut off from their family, medical treatment and commercial activities. The security situation remains tense. There are reports of harassment and reports of forced labor. Terrible to see are the numbers of deserted and destroyed or damaged properties that are left from the earlier conflict in the 90s. A lot of people are still living in these ruins. It is essential that a new mandate will be worked out for the UN presence in Georgia. Since this has to be concluded in February, I want to call for the support of all the members of this assembly and ask your government at home in whatever way they can to contribute to the future solution. In the region of South Ossetia and the other occupied territories, the situation remains extremely complicated. The remaining Georgian population is cut off from the rest of Georgia, with little or no access to humanitarian aid and little human rights monitoring. I call for the de facto South Ossetian authorities to allow humanitarian aid also coming from the south, and call for the Georgian government that the recent law on occupied territories is not applied in such a way as to prevent humanitarian aid reaching people in need in South Ossetia. In the buffer zone, it is very good to see that a lot of the inhabitants had returned. When I visited the region with the Presidential Committee in September last year, the region was bizarrely empty. Only very small groups of old people were still there, looking desolate and fearing for their safety. In my most recent visit, the situation was improved and a majority of the people had returned to their homes. However, in the areas next to the de facto border, there was still little sign of life. Without doubt, this improvement of the situation was in part due to the presence of the monitors of the EUMM. The security, however, especially close to the de facto border, remains problematic. There are continuing incidents of sniper fire, kidnappings, and roaming militia intimidating locals. I stress the fact that EUMM could get a broader mandate to be able to monitor and protect people on both sides of the de facto border. Agagori and Perivi are two regions outside of the pre-conflict de facto border of South Ossetia, from where the Russian and South Ossetian forces haven't pulled back. 5,100 people have already fled the region of Agagori. The Georgian government has shown commitment to tackle the humanitarian issues that its population is facing. They built 6,000 small houses for new IDPs. Along with the new houses, the government has been working on winterization of 137 collective centers for IDPs. I visited one such collective centers. The conditions are inhumane. For me, it is unthinkable that IDPs have been living in these conditions for 16 years. Little is done about their social and economic integration in Tbilisi, despite the fact that until today they cannot go back to the region of Abkhazia or elsewhere. For the damaged properties who stayed or returned, an amount of money is available to winterize or restore their homes. This work needs to continue as a priority. Next to that, psychological support is taken care of, but must not be underestimated. It is not only the war that leads to traumas, it are also the problems that the people face afterwards. Not to mention the fear of unexploded mines, which is still a concern. The government of Georgia has to stick to their strategy and action plan for integration of IDPs. The recent war must not be used as an excuse to delay action and in taking action. IDPs must be involved in decisions concerning them. $1.5 billion has been pledged by the international community. The vast majority of this budget has to be invested in people working for a prosperous future for the country, the only possible if they are fully integrated. Trafficking of newly displaced persons and problems of violence against women must not and cannot be hidden. Papers are full of advertisements looking for representative young women to work in restaurants in West European countries. Furthermore, in regard to these facts, I ask my colleagues to do whatever they can to avoid this type of exploitation. I would like to end by repeating that the human rights of the people of the whole of Georgia will need our attention, not only today, but also in the future. I invite all of us to go beyond ourselves and make sure that we don't lose sight of the appalling suffering which continues also today in the aftermath of the conflict between Russia and Georgia. Thank you very much.